This is the second in the series of review videos to help students with microeconomics review for the midterm and for the final. This one will talk about budget constraints, comparative advantage, efficiency, and different economic systems. At least that's as much. We'll see what else we can do. It should be, again, approximately 10 minutes long. Each one of these, I hope, will be about a 10-minute segment, which is small and easy to digest, we hope. Anyway, here we go. So the very last thing we were talking about was the production possibility curve. The production possibility curve, recall, had this shape. Things to remember. The production possibility curve talks about an entire society and its productive capacity, its ability to produce. It's a production possibility curve. It looks very similar to something else we're going to discuss just in a moment. I put them back to back, even though one's about scarcity and the other is really about consumer behavior. But here's how it goes. This one we talked about in the last segment has a shape that's bowed outward from the origin. The other one that we're going to discuss is slightly different for these reasons. The next thing is going to look like this. Again, a set of axes, and we can still put the same things here. This is clothes, as I recall. And over here were cars, and we have these two extreme points. This time I'm going to draw a straight line, and we're going to talk about what this represents. The other one was production possibility curve. This one we're going to call is a budget constraint. The difference, which is so important, the production possibility curve is about an entire society, an entire economy, and its ability to produce. This is from the perspective of an individual and the individual's choice of consumption, taking resources to go out and acquire and consume, consume goods. And we're going to do it in two dimensions, two different commodities. So in this case, we're not making clothes and cars. Making them was in the production possibility curve. Rather, we're going to be purchasing clothes and cars. And we make a couple of assumptions here. This one, because of an assumption we're going to make, has a straight line. Why? Well, the straight line is there because, as we saw before, there's a marginal rate of transformation, the ability to transform our purchase from cars to clothes, which is unvarying, is constant, gives us a straight line. And it does that because this line just is representative of the slope of the line is the ratio, the inverse ratio of the prices of these commodities. To remember that over here, this is our total budget divided by the price of clothes. That's what this point is. And this is the total budget divided by the price of cars. And when we get the slope of the line, it will be the price of clothes, the price of cars. But the prices is the ratio of the prices, or the prices that determine this line, and prices don't change. When what circumstance don't they change? They don't change if we're in a perfectly competitive market where the purchases by an individual, whomever this might be, whoever this is, the purchases don't affect the price. Don't affect the price when the purchaser, the consumer, is atomistically small and unable to change the market. Perfect competition. So this assumes we're in perfect competition and the price of these things stays the same even by all clothes or all cars. This becomes a budget constraint, and again we talk about points that are interior and exterior or on the line. Again, this is infeasible, can't purchase that. We could purchase this, but assuming that we can't transfer our money budget from one period to the next, well, that's just a waste of resources. So we're left with purchases along the line, and again, we can't choose, we can't decide which is preferable to any other bundle until we know more about the actual preferences. So at this point, we just say, here's a constraint, this is scarcity from the perspective of the consumer. The next topic will be comparative and absolute advantage. To remember that you go back and look at some of the notes and the things we did about Hatfield's and McCoy's. We're looking at the ability of one economy to make certain quantity of a certain quantity of commodity versus another quantity of commodity, and there's going to be different ratios. Probably will have a handout that would be better for students to look at there. But go back and look at that. Remember that an absolute advantage is where there's clearly, with the same level of resources, one society can make more of something than another. But a comparative advantage talks about opportunity costs, where the ability to analyze how many, for example, how many cars a society can make or what the price of cars will be. It's not in dollars, but for any one society, the price, the cost, the cost of making cars would be the number of clothes, the tons of clothes, or the number of pairs of pants that could have been made instead. So the critical part of doing comparative advantage analysis, is for each society to determine what the opportunity cost of making one of the goods is. And wherever the opportunity cost is lower, well, that's where the comparative advantage will be. And that's the country or the entity that should make that commodity and then trade with the other for mutually advantageous reasons. Efficiency. There are different types of efficiency on the exam. Efficiency is always covered. They say which one's more efficient. There are different terms to use. The most important term will be allocative efficiency. This always comes up. It comes up in the context of perfect competition versus monopoly. It's very important. In this case, we're looking at a situation where in a perfect competitive market, quantity, price, supply and demand, where we find this demand curve represents the marginal benefit that the consumer receives for consuming that product, which we know to be equal to the price that the consumer is willing to pay. This supply curve represents the marginal cost. Remember that the marginal cost of a firm is its supply curve. As the price goes up and down in the individual market, we find the firm will produce, quantities that correspond to that supply curve, quantities at these particular prices. So for a firm, the marginal cost curve is the supply curve. For the whole industry, it's the summation of marginal cost curves that gives us the supply curve. So when we look at this situation for a perfectly competitive market, we see that at this point, for any point to the left of this equilibrium, Q star, to the left of that equilibrium, for any point to the left, we have, we have the marginal benefit being greater than the marginal cost, or the price being greater than the marginal cost, which is good. That's the surplus that we described, and we will describe in other installments of this review. In that case, that's where the consumer is always getting marginal benefit greater than marginal cost. Good thing. And we produce all the way up to the point where, marginal benefit is exactly equal to marginal cost, marginal benefit equals price. So we have allocative efficiency. It gives us a situation where price is equal to marginal cost. There it is. That's how to describe it. That's how to define it on the exam. Very important. This is what you will use to describe and understand, determine the difference between perfect competition and monopoly. Very quickly, we'll talk about another way to describe efficiency. That's the most important one. We also will talk in some cases, some questions, about something called productive efficiency. Productive efficiency is, in the case of perfect competition, for the firm, looking at it from the perspective of the marginal firm has these curves. That'll be a demand curve, where we have price equals marginal revenue equals average revenue for the perfect competitive firm. We'll talk about this again in more detail, but just to look at this efficiency, marginal cost, this is where solution step number one, the firm will produce, that'll be our Q hat, and then for the marginal firm, there's zero economic profits, and that last firm will be producing at a point where the average cost is equal to average revenue. Equal to marginal cost equals marginal revenue, and that's at the minimum of the average total cost curve. So for in perfect competition, we drive the price and the demand curves to the point where this firm is producing at the minimum of the average total cost curve, and that is productive efficiency. More later.